Greetings, and welcome to Stuffology. We're two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis, pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McCord, and I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Oh, it's hi this time, not hello. You normally say hello. You've changed it.
Yeah, I know.
Oh,
Well,
that's
after
exciting.
the last episode, I wanted to shake things up a bit, prove to you that I could still be flexible in our opening format and give you something different to work with. So, yes, hi instead of saying hello.
Well, hi, and that's important. I now feel nostalgic about the good old days when you used to say hello, and I've got to get used to this new version and love it just as much as the old.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that beautiful setup to this episode song, which is, of course, in my life. So, yeah, it's one of the biggies. This episode, one of the best regarded, I guess, of the Beatles canon. Do you think it deserves that status?
Yes.
Good. Thanks for listening. And
Okay, so cards on the table. This is up to this point the single best song that they have recorded and released. And yeah, obviously it's in my view because I've said it. There are many other fantastic, amazing songs. The poppy singles are brilliant. People will slather over Yesterday, as exquisite as it is, but I think there's something that is um, really innovative about this, and it's both forward looking and also backward looking. I'm not talking lyrically there, I'm thinking musically with the old George Martin interlude, for example. I think this is the almost perfect summation of their career at this point, and then a flag in terms of um, as a flag, as a template, but almost laying the template for innovation to come in the future. This
okay.
is the reason why I've been giving really half decent songs like 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10. I needed that headroom. I couldn't go giving, lots of things, say 8 out of 10, because if I give this 9 or I give this 10, am I saying that those other songs, which are pretty good, they're only 1 or 2 marks below? And that's the problem of your scoring system.
Well, good. I like to think that it challenges you in some way and makes you think about what you're going to do. And so I guess that acts as a really good incentive for our listeners to make it all the way to the end of this episode and discover what score you are going to give it. Don't spoil it now. Just just keep your powder dry, and we'll see where we go with that. I got to say, I more or less agree with you. I think this is an absolutely exquisite piece of work. It's effortlessly the best song that Lennon has written at this point in his career, and he rated it very, very highly indeed. Now we will have some discussion, no doubt, as to the origins of this song and who's responsible for what, because there does
Don't
seem to be
care.
a genuine dispute about it. But yeah, it's just it's an astounding song, and we've had some pretty good material on this album, but nothing that comes close to touching this. Nothing that has the lyrical depth on it. Nothing which has the musical scope of it. It just everything works here so perfectly. This is a genuinely amazing song.
So where do you want to start then? Do you want to start with the the music, the lyrics, the playing, the production, the myth, the legend,
Let's start with the
the
lyrics. Why don't we start with the lyrics?
okay. So there is, I think what's really interesting about this is that there is a sophistication and a simplicity to it. I do not think this is a complex lyric in any way, shape, or form. However, it is a much more crafted lyric. It is a much more considered lyric. I don't feel as though it's thrown together at all. Now, of course, the legend is that it started off as reminisces on the bus on the way into what Menlove Avenue to Liverpool. Fair enough. Apparently, the original version, the original draft of those lyrics would also have included references to places like Penny Lane. I don't mind the fact that that got stripped away. because I think what we've been left with is something that is heartfelt and feels sincere, but also something that catches people out for reasons that we'll perhaps come on to. I think more perhaps when we talk about cover versions, I've got a real kind of point related to that. But I think the sophistication comes from the fact that you're talking about places and people. You're introducing this other element. You're introducing this notion of complexity. Well, I'm you know, we are products of our environment, our environments, and we take those ideas forward wherever we go, wherever we end up. Just like whoever we end up with in our various friendship relationship groups, they are the result of all the relationships that have gone before. And that's a really complex idea to put across in a 3-minute pop song. And I think he does it. But, you know, if you look through, he is not using sophisticated language to do that. There's nothing in there that makes me think, well, you know, he swallowed a dictionary now. But there's much more genuine, personal, heartfelt emotion in lines like, though I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before, I know I'll often stop and think about them. And it's genuinely touching and genuinely him hopefully putting his own feelings on a line in a way that perhaps he's been reluctant to do at times, as in a positive feeling rather than a why do you hate me kind of feeling.
It's a very unguarded lyric, I think. It's a very open lyric, which is the thing that we've really started to see Lennon develop, I think, on this album. And that word, affection, although I know I'll never lose
Yeah,
affection, that's not a word that Lennon would ever have used prior to this. It's not, like you said, it's not swallowed a dictionary sort of levels of language, but it's a new type of emotional palette that he has never really played with before. We've had him tending to swing between the kind of love songs and the kind of why don't you love me songs. We see that is diversifying now when we start to get songs like Nowhere Man, but like an emotion like affection isn't one that we've ever really seen touched on at this stage, and it gives the song something else. I'm with you when you say I completely agree about it not being a problem that this sheds all the kind of like local references on the bus ride, because it also lends it a universality that I think if you were constantly referring to here's the tram yards, here's Penny Lane, here's Strawberry Fields or whatever, like those things will go on to be useful in other contexts and other songs further down the line. But that universality, the fact that this has less specific references but much broader context, is very, very much what I think the song needs, and it lets it really benefits from it. Fine, we'll get Strawberry Fields and that will be its own thing. Fine, we'll get Penny Lane, it will be its own thing as well. But maybe very similar things, but that's fine too. But this song has that universality and that broad appeal would, I think, be a little undercut if it had the specificity of place names in it.
but those lyrics can work, and hopefully when we do talk about Penny Lane in a few years time, well, the point that I'll remember to make is that just because you are not aware of the specific references, that doesn't mean it can't affect you, because what it then does is it reminds you of your version of that.
Oh,
So
absolutely, yeah,
that
of
can work.
course.
However, for all the people that can draw in, it may also isolate people from the song if they don't know the references. So yes, so the universality of this I think is important. But I am just also going to draw a comparison with the last episode. We did talk about the lyrics if I'm looking through you, but there was one line that we didn't actually talk about, that we did talk about before we recorded. You know, McCartney says love has a nasty habit of disappearing overnight. To which my response is, Mr. McCartney, it's probably not love then, is it? Whereas here, Lennon's talking about things not, you know, he's not losing affection for people and places. And that actually everything there brings him to this point. It's all useful. So I think there's just that interesting point that where Lennon and McCartney have coincidentally written about a very similar idea from a very different point of view and come to a different conclusion about it as well. Although, of course, whether or not that's deliberate and actually represents their feelings, we can get into that debate. The level of personal in the authorship, but I just thought that was a little comparison that was worth making.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, this is a much more emotionally sophisticated song than I'm Looking Through You. As I mentioned in the last episode, I really like I'm Looking Through You. I think it's a cracking song, one of the best in the album. But this is head and shoulders above it. There's no question about that. Of course there isn't. And it is, I suppose it is nostalgic in a way, but it's not really whimsical, and that's quite a difficult
Yeah,
balance to strike as well. I think there's an immediacy to this song and the way that the lyric is constructed that gives it that emotional sophistication. It's not just about being reflective, and that can lead to kind of being a bit mordant or a bit melancholy or whatever. This isn't that kind of song, and the sophistication in the lyric that comes through means that it isn't falling into these kind of easy emotional I don't want to say cliches, that's too strong, but easily emotional traps like, oh, this could easily fall back into whimsy or that kind of thing. It's not. It's very sophisticated in the way that it interacts with the past and present. And again, we just haven't seen anything of that level of sophistication up to this point.
and that's evident in the structure of the song as well. And I might refer to this as, if you want a sort of a really very simple, straightforward example of how this is done is, well, this one goes out to the one I love. This one goes out to,
Yeah, yeah,
there's the third repetition of that, the tenses then change.
yeah.
And so, oh, look, Stipe, aren't you being clever? Well, he is and he isn't, but let's not debate that now. We'll save that for our REM podcast. No, we're not doing that. The first two verses are principally about that reflection on how things have changed and about how those things have affected me. But then we start to introduce then in the third verse, or we go first bridge. All right, okay, first bridge. This is the point at which, dear listener, if you hadn't already worked out that I know nothing about musical structure, yeah. Anyway, when I think of love as something new comes in, I mean, there's no one that compares with you. So there's that element of then, well, now I'm going to relate it to the present. Now I'm going to say, okay, so here's everything that's gone part. Here's everything that's in the past, and now, okay, so here's how the past has brought me to this. And I think that's really, really simple and really clever. It's just a nice little shift that works, and I also think is potentially overlooked as well, because this seems to be held up as the great nostalgia song. But in my mind, he's saying that the past is great, but the present with you is even better.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's very easy to like I said, I think it's very easy to miss that point. I don't think it's that easy to miss out. I think that's kind of the point of the song, but it seems like a lot of people do kind of miss that. It isn't just reflections, it isn't just nostalgia. It's about the present, and that shift from looking back to looking as things are now is extremely elegantly handled. It's a very it's just elegant is the word that I keep using, but I think it's another one where the song structure really works in favor of the lyric, because if we shifted into like a middle A, or if we shifted into like something like that, there would be almost like a barrier between the discussions of the past and the discussions of the present. We have the organ solo, and that's fine, but because the verses and the bridges are the same all the way through, the structure doesn't vary, it's able to move from that talk of the past into that talk of the present. Very elegantly. It's a very clean transition, but it means that both are being given equal weight. One isn't being given primacy by the structure of the song, even although when the song ends, it's the present that we're talking about. I absolutely adore that about that. It's such a clever way of using the structure of the song to reinforce the lyric.
I think the I'm going to make a comparison now. American listeners, I know we have a significant percentage of our audience are American listeners. I would genuinely be interested to know how you feel about this, but I am now going to compare John Lennon to Robert Frost. I was going to do this when we talked about cover versions, but we'll revisit that one. And I mean, there are a couple of examples where Robert Frost writes his poems in a way that is really clean and clear and sophisticated, but relatively straightforward. And the result of that is that people often miss the point he's trying to make. The famous example of that is about the good fences make good neighbors, and people then completely misunderstand what he's writing about in terms of the way in which fences create barriers and don't create anyway. But the road not taken is the principal example of this, and people so often look at that poem and think that if he'd have taken the road less travelled by, that it would have made all the difference, because the last stanza says, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. But actually, when you dig into it, what he was aiming for was that he was going to tell himself that by taking that road, it made all the difference. But actually, it didn't. He's just trying to persuade himself that life would have been different if he had taken that route. And actually, once you understand that, you kind of look at it in a different way. So the fact that there are lots of people who see this as being, elegiac and nostalgic, and some things have changed, and miss the past, blah blah blah. Great, if they want to take that meaning, that's fine, but they're missing the sophistication of what Lennon is doing here, and as a result, they miss some of the richness of what Lennon is doing here. And what I find really interesting is that he's writing this lyric about this person who has made all the difference. But is he writing about sin? Sorry, is he writing about Cynthia? I was writing about sin. Maybe that could be misinterpreted, couldn't it? CYN. Is he writing about Cynthia? I mean, surely his relationship at this point wasn't so strong that he would be talking about her as being the person who has made all the difference, if you like. Perhaps he would be telling himself, if he had stayed with Cynthia, he would have been telling himself with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, that two relationships diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by. And maybe, because perhaps it would have been easier if and now I'm doing the thing that you did in the last episode of adding in layers of interpretation. I'm really going to town with this Robert Frost John Lennon comparison. I ought to stop.
It's a good comparison. Don't be reflexively shy about it. But yeah, no, I mean you're completely correct. And I don't know particularly who the subject of this song is, but again, I suppose that does lean into its universality. It does allow it to have that. But it would only be a couple of years from this point onwards when we would all know precisely who the subject of this song
if
is.
They had met at that point.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't seem obvious that it's sin.
But it's in keeping with some of his writing at the time. For example, Girl, wasn't it? We were talking about the fact that the suggestion is he's writing about this notional ideal person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who at that point didn't actually exist, but who turned out to be some way down the line Yoko. We're not ascribing any sense of premonition here, but it certainly seems to be a theme that's on his mind at the moment, which I think is an interesting thing. I think as well, an aspect of this song that really works, and we'll just sort of not quite segue into the covers, but we'll come back to this point maybe in the covers, is the fact that it's quite punchy. This is not a slow dirge. This has a really good kind of rhythm to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it does have a good sense of rhythm to it and a good sense of pace to it. And when I was talking about I'm looking through you, we did have that conversation about the fact that it's pacey really helped to prop up this side of the album, which could otherwise get could be a bit sludgy after this. But one of the interesting things about In My Life is that musically it clips along, even though it has this nostalgia, it has this reflection, and it has this kind of eventual sort of almost revelation at the end of it. It doesn't drag its heels in order to do that. Now, I do think, and here I'm going to have to very strongly disagree with McDonald, but I do think part of that is the keyboard solo. I think George Martin's work in this is extraordinarily good and really, really appropriate for the song. If I remember correctly, I think McDonald says something along the lines of, "It's a great solo, but whether it fits the song is another matter." Fuck you, McDonald. It fits the song perfectly. It's a great addition to the song. And like when we were talking about, I'm looking through, you were talking about the way that it has this sort of almost choral feel to the harmonies about it. Here on the very next song, we have something that really is Baroque, something which is Bach inspired, and sounds like a harpsichord, and that's really, really effective for this song.
It's a clever Baroque pastiche, complete with authentic shakes, apparently. Whether it's dancing lightness and concluding disappearance through the trapdoor of a witty glissando really suit the song's mood of sighing introspection is another question.
Oh, do fuck off.
Okay.
Sorry, I think that solo is genuinely amazing, and I think it adds so much texture and nuance to the song as well, especially because by that point the song is really sort of shifting its perspective as well. It's already had its initial kind of nostalgia and reflection. It's moving in to a different aspect of the song, and that solo fits it perfectly. I can't imagine what it would have been like if it had a George Harrison guitar solo in there or something like that. And that's not in any way meant to disrespect George, of course it's not. But it just fits this song so beautifully that it does take this sidestep into something which is a little bit more Baroque, which is a little bit more out of the ordinary. We haven't really had much that kind of comes up to that. It just fits.
Although maybe the Harrison, if there had been a Harrison guitar part in there, that would have been the road less travelled. And because we wouldn't have known of the George Martin solo, we probably would still love the song just as much.
Possibly, but it isn't the road less travelled. we know precisely what we have. I mean, George is still playing guitar on this song. It's not like it's not like he's absent from it, and phenomenally well. Again, just perfect on this, as everyone is. But yeah, sorry, you were going to say.
No, but it's worth remembering that. I mean, I think you're right in terms of where it comes in terms of the tonal shift in the lyrics, and it does work. But if it wasn't there, it would still be an amazing piece of work.
Oh God, yeah, of course, yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's not like the song is only good because of that. Absolutely not. But it adds so much texture to the piece, and it just is. It's one of those things where you just. I don't know. I like, as obviously people who listen to this podcast regularly know, I play a bit and whatever. I'm not particularly great or anything, but I'm just in absolute awe of people who can just sit down and produce something and it is just perfect. And that's precisely what I think this solo is.
The solo.
The
song.
Well, a song as well, but I'm specifically in this case talking about the keyboard solo. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, perfection is an interesting idea, though, isn't it? Because I mean, but are there not some bits that maybe you could sort of pick at a bit?
Such
I
as,
mean,
I
well,
feel I'm being
okay,
set up
so
for a fall here, but come on, I'll bite.
um, so we were very positive about I'm looking through you, and I think listeners might feel as though those episodes aren't quite as good as the ones as we're being all cynical and moody. And so far, we've had 25 minutes of wow, isn't this brilliant? And even for me, I've been banging on about, hey, Lennon's a genius here. And yeah, regular listeners will know that well, I'm a little bit more guarded about his geniosity. I know that's not a word, but just go with it. Um, I, oh, you're not going to like it. Um, I think Ringo's doing some weird stuff on this.
If I had to criticize anybody on this recording, it would be Ringo. So you're off the hook. You don't have to. We don't have to
I
lead into some kind
I
of
wrote
false
down.
controversy here. But
So I wrote down in my notes. Now I realise that this is that there is a lack of tonality to drumming, but Ringo manages to make some of the drumming. I think in particular, anyway, completely atonal. There's some weird there's some weird stuff going on. I think it's almost the constant repetition. Is it the symbol?
yeah, yeah, the hi hat. The
That yeah,
yeah, that's yeah. He's
that's
closing the hi hat. Yeah.
that just a little less hearing go would be okay. But you know, that's and I guess also the other thing that I would take out would be the kind of the semi falsetto bit at the end as well. I think it would work perfectly well without that. However, you can still get very, very high marks, if not full marks, without being perfect. Because what is perfect?
What?
Uh,
Well, you have given exactly one song in this project, 10 out of 10.
have I
So yeah, you
have I
have.
really given a 10? What did I give 10 to?
Ticket to Ride.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you
Oh,
did.
okay.
Yeah, I've yet to give a 10, and I am also keeping my powder dry for a couple of songs further down the line. But yeah, you gave 10 out of 10 to Ticket to Ride. Though to be fair, I gave it 9.5, so it's not like there's a vast
Mm,
gulf of opinion between us.
mm. So I think I would say that this is a stronger candidate for that kind of mark because it's a band effort.
Mm.
It does feel like there is something complete about it, whereas something like Yesterday, for example, is beautiful as it is much more of an individual piece. Now, obviously, slightly further down the line, we will get some examples of an individual Beatle producing works of genius as they sort of splinter in terms of their recording. But at this point, I still feel that they are this real cohesive unit and that they're at their best when they are all contributing towards it. And I do feel as although this is John through and through as far as I'm concerned. I think there's a bit of retrospective work by McCartney done in terms of boosting his legacy on this. If that's true, whatever. But I think this being a Lennon song, and I've got to the point where I don't remember the point I was making at the start of that sentence. So
Okay.
let's do it. Let's just hand it over, and you say I completely agree.
Ah, I completely agree. Excellent.
I, I do think though. Okay, right. To sort of pick up a slight thread though. I think one of the things that yeah, to go back to the George Martin piece, I think one of the things that makes that such an interesting and significant piece in the song is that when you listen to an awful lot of the cover versions, most don't attempt it.
Yeah, funny that, and that's because it's amazing, and but also really tough. It's a really
Yeah.
difficult thing to do, and you need to kind of be George Martin to pull that off. Yeah, I'm not at all surprised that very few of the cover versions uh, go anywhere near it, because this is one song which is very easy to do a slow down acoustic version of, and let's be honest, that's what about 95% of the cover versions are. You don't need to include that solo, even although the song
Yeah.
misses something for not having it in there.
But I do also think that that's where a lot of the cover versions go wrong, in the
Yes.
sense of let's slow it down and make it acoustic. And that's why the Beatles version reigns absolutely supreme, because it matches the rhythm to the optimism of the song as well. And I think once you take that out, it does can get a bit dirge like. It can become very introspective and reflective and nostalgic, and you can then end up changing that I love you more to what sounds like in an awful lot of these cover versions, I loved you more, as though you're then looking back at the end of life. Well, he wrote this when he was what, 23, 24 ish, around there. And he was still a young person looking forward, and a lot of these other versions lose that because of their need to reflect as older people.
Well, yeah, exactly. And there are occasions when you can get away with this. And of course, the cover version that best exemplifies that is the Johnny Cash one. This is a man at the end of his life looking back. And, it's an astonishing cover version. It's a really, really good version of the song. I mean,
Yeah,
bloody Johnny Cash, of course it is.
yeah.
And it's from The Man Comes Around, which is an astonishingly good album. It's amazing. But, you know, when you are at that point in life, and let's be honest, he was very near death when he recorded it, you're allowed to ascribe that to it. And yet there's something about the Johnny Cash version that I still think feels like it gets the present tense of the end of the song. Of course it's reflective, and he's got this, his voice is so beautiful at that point in his life. This deep, gravelly, incredibly emotional voice, and it's an amazing match for the material here. I've heard a lot of people sort of criticize the Cash version because he doesn't have the range to be able to pull off all the sort of changes in the song, but that's so spectacularly misses the point of the thing. The whole point is the emotion that he is able to absolutely pour into this song. This is an extraordinary cover version, but it feels like it gets, like, even at that point in his life, it still feels like it has that contemporaneous, like, but now this is the thing. Whether that's because he was, still with June at the time or whatever, I don't know. I don't want to speak for him, but it's an amazing cover version. And yes, so many of the other ones just miss that. And yeah, it can be plodding when you just treat it as a bit of whimsy or as a bit of looking back nostalgia.
But I think that what that does is, I think it reinforces my view that that falsetto at the end isn't needed.
No, I mean
Um,
Cash certainly didn't need it, and wouldn't have been able to do it even if it was.
yeah, yeah. Um, Covers. There are so many. Were
Oh,
there
there's a
any that you?
bajillion and seven
Well,
cover
hang
versions
on.
of this
But
song.
before you jump in, were there any others that you liked?
Not really. And I think that's very telling as well. There's not an awful lot else that I think really stood up, and it's because so many of them adopt precisely the same approach. It's very much, well, we'll slow it down, we'll do it acoustically, or we'll wobble around the note a little bit or whatever. But a lot of them just really so fundamentally miss the point. That of all people, there's an Ozzy Osbourne cover, and it's so bad. It's so slow and plodding, and he
Yeah,
can't sing it, and it's got no emotion or meaning in it at all.
I
It's dreadful.
I think it's the production that is guilty. That the production of that
It
is
certainly doesn't help.
truly
Yeah.
truly woeful. But before we get sidetracked into the bits we did, because I mean it would be, I mean I think the ones that are really bad are few and far between, and I think that is because of the strength of the song. So there are lots of examples of people recording this for, Beatles covers albums or Beatles celebration events. There's an Ed Sheeran one, a Beatles dinner thing, which, is I mean, I'm not I've never really listened to much Ed Sheeran. It's perfect. If he can sing okay, that's fine. You know, and he there's a little bit of you know of urgency about the way he plays the guitar, but it's just a very basic, straightforward cover. There's nothing kind of new or fresh in it. And that's fine. That's probably what the audience at that point wanted. There's a Dave Matthews cover of him playing it solo. Well, actually, he has a keyboard player who plays the organ part, and it's very Dave Matthews. It's perfectly proficient. He sings it with a little bit of soul and emotion, and you know, and it's perfectly fine. Um, but the really good ones are kind of few and far between. I really do like the Judy Collins version, and that's one that we've mentioned her before. I think it might have been something like I Follow the Sun, but there've been a couple of hers because she did I think in '66 she did an album of Beatles covers, and and some of them are really quite interesting. There's I don't know if you're aware of Joel Grey. I don't know if you've ever seen the film Cabaret.
No, definitely not.
Okay. It's really good. It's a really good musical, actually. And yeah. And anyway,
You'll never persuade
um,
me of that fact, but that's okay.
no, it's fine. But it combines things that you're interested in history. You're interested in Berlin. You know. So anyway, Joel Grey plays the MC in that. Which is a really, really good role. It's a really interesting role. And then when we saw it live in the West End, so Eddie Redmayne's played that role in the West End. When we saw it, Julian Clary. It's really interesting.
When you say we, I want to clarify that means you and your missus, not you and I.
Yeah. But so Joel Grey was a really kind of emerging Broadway star in the '60s. And he did an album, I think towards the end of the '60s, where there's a version of it. It swings. You know, there's a bit of pep to it, so it's quite interesting. Roddy Frame, one of Scotland's finest,
Yes.
of Aztec Camera. I think he did an acoustic, but a peppy acoustic version that actually then, when he's playing the guitar, yes, he's playing, you know, half the line is what you'd expect from the guitar line, but he's adding his own little flourishes in as well. And he's putting a little of his own emotion into it, which works for me. I'm also going to give a little bit of kudos to Mr. Keith Moon.
Oh, thank God for that. For a second, I thought you were going to say Rod Stewart, and I'd have to end this podcast here and now.
No. I find Keith Moon's cover of it absolutely fascinating. It's because you know, if you think of Keith Moon, if you know next to nothing about Keith Moon, you know that party animal, major alcoholic, and then to hear a slowed down version of this where he's crooning. It is crooning.
Oh yeah, for
you
sure.
Sort of imagine him sort of sitting down going, no, I that's how the world sees me, but I want to show my artistry. So on this album, I'm going to sing In My Life by the Beatles, and I'm going to do it seriously, and we're going to get a little bit of orchestration in, and it's going to be magnificent. And then we're going, are you going to play drums on it? No, not on this one. That's all right. Although that said, bearing in mind how hard he would hit the drums, it may not have been appropriate anyway. So I find that absolutely fascinating. And I just sort of wonder then that if perhaps Sid Vicious had had slightly better management, that his version of My Way could have been so much. Can you imagine if he'd crooned My Way rather than did the version that he did? Yeah. Could have shown a completely different side to him. So there are some interesting ones out there, and actually I don't think I'm going to mention the ones that I didn't like, because invariably I didn't get very far through them.
No, that's fair enough. And given how many of them there are, there's only so many hours in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you spend your hours of the day?
Well, I mean, listening to
Rod Stewart?
Yeah, it's so bad. But also, it's precisely what you imagine a Rod Stewart cover version of "In My Life" will sound like. You know, it's him. I agree with you about the Keith Moon version. I think it's really interesting. I don't know. I don't know whether I would describe the word good to it. But it's interesting. It's interesting to hear him do something so unexpected, and you know, like
There you go.
for so many of these cover versions, like we've said it time and time again when we talk about cover versions, they don't need to necessarily be good or great or whatever, but if they at least try something, and 95% of these are just here's an acoustic guitar, here's me roughly singing the song. It's so boring. And for all that the Keith Moon version is, I don't know. It's interesting, and that's fine. That's more than enough to justify spending the time listening to it.
Mm.
Is it as good as Johnny Cash version? No, because Johnny Cash probably did the best cover version of this song that there is. But that's all right. Falling short of Johnny Cash is no crime. Most people do. But it's still a really interesting take on the song, and that alone kind of makes it worthwhile in the annals of Beatles cover versions.
I am going to just insert little asterisks there, and of course, just as a reminder, say not everything that Johnny Cash did was good.
Oh no, no, but
there's some utter tosh in that back catalogue.
Well,
however,
he has a lot of albums released.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's absolutely fair enough. Yes, and what was it Lennon said about Elvis? He died when he went into the army.
Yeah.
So everything post Elvis, yeah. Post Elvis, post Army,
yeah.
There will be, phases in Johnny Cash's career. 70s, I'm looking at you, where other things may have taken over. That's fine. One thing we haven't discussed yet, unless of course you've got some more covers that you want to mention.
No, I'm all good in cover versions, thank you.
Okay. It's been interesting reading about the original idea of being, sitting on a bus in Liverpool, taking through all the places, because when I listen to this song, it does sort of take me back to the 250 bus in good old God's own country, South London, and I wonder if that's also partly because that's the bus that I would have taken from the record shop that I used to go to quite a lot back to home. And I used to remember then, being on the bus and then taking the records out and having a look at the sleeves or the CD case, whatever it was in that case. So I sort of have a nostalgic view of that. And I wonder if perhaps, and that is a distinct memory I have when I hear or used to listen to this song as well. But it is also that reminder that people do move on, that I hold a very strong personal emotional attachment to South London, but and actually the last time we went up to London and stayed for I think 2 nights, 3 nights, I did make a point of we were staying near Waterloo, but I did make a point of I actually went early on, I think the Sunday morning, for a long run down to where I grew up and back again, and sort of went on the road I grew up and ran the route that I used to go to school and then back and sort of refamiliarized myself, and those places, they have changed, and some of them really not for better. And it's noticeable that we're doing something similar this in a few weeks' time, actually. And I've kind of decided not to do that again. I did think about it, and I did sort of plot lots of different routes and think about how it would work in with the time frame. But I think that's partly also because I do often have this attachment to places in the past, but then actually I don't feel the need to now, because I think where I am now has a stronger attachment for me in my present. It's not to say that I love one more than the other, because the one has led me to where I am, but I don't feel the need to constantly revisit that anymore. I don't know if that makes any sense. So I don't know if you have any kind of personal recollection of any attachment. And I think that's one of the reasons, because I think that is the kind of thing that does make this I'm not going to tell you the exact number, but certainly no lower than 10 out of 10, when it comes to the scoring for this.
I mean, I have a very similar kind of outlook, I think, which is probably not like a great surprise. I lived Oh, I'm from Glasgow originally, and I lived away from Glasgow for many, many years of my life. When you and I were at, let's say, university, I was away for a few years down in England, and then I moved over to the Netherlands for 13 years. And when I moved back to Scotland, I moved to Edinburgh, not Glasgow, and I lived there for 5 or 6 years before I finally moved back to Glasgow. So I've moved around a little bit kind of across my life, and it's always interesting to go back, but the older I get, the less inclined I feel to do it. I think the last time I was back in Winchester was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I'm fine if it's another decade or longer before I go back. And that's not to be dismissive of the time that I spent here. In fact, the time I spent here is some of the happiest times of my entire life, not least of which, our friendship comes from that.
Well, you didn't look bloody happy for some of it, mate.
Well, it was
there were things going on.
Yeah. Let's not go into all of that right now. But all right, let me say it a different way. It was a formative period of my life. That seems unquestionable. And I will always look back on that time with love and with affection, with the people, the places, the times, everything about it. It was an extraordinary time, but it is also something I'm comfortable to say that is in my past. I will always love it. I will always have an amazing association with it, but I have also moved on from it. And if you'll indulge me a small personal anecdote, after we were in Winchester and I moved back to Glasgow, I remember at one point being in the pub with like a bunch of my friends. We weren't really doing anything. We just we went to the pub on a Friday night or whatever. And I have such a clear vision of thinking, if I don't do something with my life, I'm still going to be here in 40 years' time, drinking the same drinks with the same people, having the same conversations, and I'll be looking back and, well, what the fuck did I do? Where did it all go? So it was kind of, that evening was kind of like the inspiration for me to get off my arse, move abroad, like learn a new language, like get a career, like just go away and do something, not just fall into this kind of lazy, way of living. I can't imagine anything worse than having got to this age and thinking, oh, but I could have been a contender. I don't want to be that, and so I did, and that was fine, and some of it was great, some of it was less great. That's fine. That's all part of life. So I look back in those times with that reflective element in it. Again, the song captures, sorry to pull it back to what we're nominally talking about, the song does capture that feeling. Like, where I've been back to Amsterdam a few times since I've left, and I love going back and I love seeing it again and all the rest of it. Same with when I go back to Winchester or wherever. But it's a thing that I did, and I'm okay with having moved on from that. And, those friends that I used to sit about in the pub with, there's no animosity, but we don't see each other anymore. I moved on and they kind of didn't, and that's fine. People are entitled to live their life any way they want. There's no judgment attached to that, but I wanted to move on and do something else, and I'm okay sort of saying, well, yeah, I moved on from that, and again, in my life is just such a beautiful way of being able to encapsulate that. I'm happy where I am now.
That's so what I'm hearing from that is that people that grow up and stay in Scotland are parochial.
That's a very judgmental way of looking at it for somebody who loves South London and then left. I love Croydon. You there? No.
10 out of 10. Come on, 10 out of 10.
Come on, 10 out of 10? All right, well, you know what? I'm not going to argue with you in this case. I'm also going to give it a 10.
I love you more. I can sing better than that. I just choose not to on this occasion.
Okay, that's good to know. I remember you having a very good singing voice.
Oh, shut up. Move on.
Okay,
stop living in the past. Quit living in the past. You're living in the past, man.
All right. Well, it's time to imply the future. If you wish, you can really get a hold of us. We are Stuffology@gmail.com. If you wish to email us, we are on the sad and tragic remains of Twitter.
Well, if you want to have a discussion about Robert Frost poetry, then Twitter is the place to do it, because I'll pick it up there. So dear listener, if you think I've got it wrong, I haven't, then send us a message on the twits.
Lovely. Well, you can do Beatles_ology. We're also Beatles Stuffology on Instagram, and you can find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot. Please also like, rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher you're using so that more people can find the show. Next episode, it's time to wait. And, as always, we hope you're going to join us for it. But, until then, keep listening.